Hello, I'm Rabbi Elton from the Great Synagogue in Sydney, and our personality today is Yitzhak Rabin, born in 1922 and died by murder in 1995. Yitzhak Rabin's assassination was the most impactful event in Israeli politics and events of my early years. It happened when I was 15 years old and sent extraordinary shockwaves through me and through everyone I knew. We were in the throes of debates about the rightness or wrongness of the Oslo Accords, but the assassination of the Prime Minister was a deeply impactful and traumatic event for everybody involved in those discussions and everyone who cared about the state of Israel and its prosperity. He was born to secular, left-wing Zionist parents in Jerusalem. They themselves were immigrants from Eastern Europe, but he was born and bred and lived his whole life in the land and the state of Israel. He joined the Haganah at the age of only 14, then the underground and left-wing aligned military movement seeking an independent Jewish state from the British. In fact, he scorned to learn English as a young man because he saw it as the language of the enemy. He was deeply involved in the 1948 war, having a command in the Negev and around Jerusalem, and that was also the year he married his wife Leah. After the war, he remained a career soldier and was very involved in defending the state as a general in the 1950s. He was seen as the victor of the 1967 war, the Six-Day War, when Jerusalem was reunified and the parts of eastern Jerusalem captured, as well as large areas now known as the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. In 1968, he started making a transition away from military to wider public life. He'd always been left-wing aligned, often very left-wing and even pro-Soviet aligned, but he'd been moving back to the centre of Israeli politics. He was first sent as ambassador to Washington in 1968, and in 1973 he was elected to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. It was a very swift rise to a leading position. He was made a Minister of Labour in Golda Meir's cabinet in 1974, and then in the same year he succeeded her as leader of the party and as Prime Minister of the state. He was brought down by what was seen then as a corruption scandal. In fact, it seems more like a technical breach of the rules than fundamental corruption, and he lost in 1977. But he returned to government in the 1980s as part of the broad spectrum national unity government that took office in the early 1980s under both Yitzhak Shamir and also Shimon Peres, his long-standing rival on the left of Israeli politics. He orchestrated and led the campaign against the First Intifada, the first uprising by Palestinian Arabs in the occupied territories, and utilised some fairly harsh and strict tactics in order to suppress that uprising, which may have made it surprising for some when he became the leading advocate of a more peaceful approach in the 1990s. He was elected in 1992 with the mandate to seek to negotiate with the leaders of the Palestinian people and the surrounding Arab states. That of course led to the Oslo Accords and some very famous moments: the shaking of Yasser Arafat's hand on the White House lawn, his statement "Enough of blood and tears, enough," which summarised his commitment to a more peaceful future, the award of the Nobel Peace Prize alongside Yasser Arafat and Shimon Peres, and then of course his assassination at the hands of Yitzhak Rabin, an extremist, after a peace rally in Tel Aviv in 1995. He has left a legacy in terms of inspirational leadership towards a more peaceful future for the Israeli people and those who surround them, but I think it's also fair to say the peace process itself has never recovered. The aspirations and high hopes of the Rabin years have been disappointed ever since. Thanks for joining.